living fully alive in every way. You're listening to Relationship Prescriptions with Dr. Carol.
Have you ever had God do a 180 on you? Hi there, I'm Dr. Carol, and this is Relationship Prescriptions. My guests today, Chad and Julie Canon, experienced exactly that. And frankly, I experienced that even during this conversation. I knew Chad and Julie Canon had gone through the process of adoption and the challenges related to that. I was not aware until preparing for this particular episode with the Canons of how God had used that experience in their own lives in marriage. You'll want to listen to this episode. Chad Canon is the former vice president of marketing at Thomas Nelson Publishers. He had his own marketing agency for a period of time, and now he is chief marketing officer at Michael Hyatt & Company. His wife, Julie, has had a photography business in the past and now is enjoying being the mother to their daughter. This story of the process of adoption, but even more, what this process did in the hearts and lives of Chad and Julie themselves is something that will bless you a great deal. So here is my conversation with Chad and Julie Canon. Well, Chad and Julie Canon, it is a pleasure and an honor to have you on our program today. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
We're super excited to be here. Thanks, Dr. Carol.
Now, your home was blessed 2.5 years ago or so with a daughter, but your daughter did not come in the easiest or perhaps usual way. You sought adoption. And let me just start by asking you what was going on in your hearts at the time that you were seeking a child this way. How did that route of building a family come to be important to you?
Yeah, adoption was something that we talked about before we even got married. That was, something that was both of our hearts as far as, a way that we would grow our family. Eventually, we have a couple of adopted cousins that we love dearly, and a lot of our friends adopted. So it wasn't a foreign idea to us by any stretch of the imagination. We, I think, dealt with something that a lot of people probably listening and a lot of people we certainly know that is very common, went through years of infertility. So that wasn't the determining factor of adoption, was a second choice type of situation. But it was, as far as we wanted to know our next step as far as growing our family. And I would say for me, I was fearful of sort of the process of adoption. So we delayed it, I would say, because of me for years, just as far as being fearful of where to start, what agency do you go to, how do you raise the money, all of the details, plus all of the unknowns that, comes along with just adoption. And, so there were a lot of years I think we just sort of waited. I wouldn't say they were wasted by any stretch, but we definitely waited and ended up finding a route that we eventually ended up going, and, it led us to Crew. So God definitely had a plan as far as, that one. I can't imagine any other little child was more perfect for us at the time. So, but I would say that was kind of, from my perspective, what was happening.
Yeah. And I would say for us, adoption is a big thing, obviously. I mean, it just, even being a parent, bringing a child into this world is a big thing. It's a big change in your life. We kind of had the 5-year plan, like, hey, let's enjoy marriage 5 years and kind of figure, after that, start to grow the family. And as she mentioned, infertility was part of our story. And we definitely always wanted to adopt to begin with, but we were on different journeys even in that point. Like, I think there was some delay because of fear of the paperwork and the process, but there were times where I was all in, or she, maybe wasn't all in, and vice versa. I know we've got friends that are kind of going through that right now too, that, it's something I recommend both of you being on the same page about, and so it took us some years for both of us to kind of get on the same page. And looking back, while those moments were hard, knowing that we ended up with Crew being the perfect child that God really chose for us, like, that was kind of sweet moments of delay looking back now, but in the moment, those were not sweet moments of delay at all.
Right. Right. We've talked about infertility on this program, and that's been part of where in the medical side of my life, I have dealt a lot with couples, and that's a huge issue. But let me ask you too, in the process of thinking about adoption, and forgive me if this is outside of your experience, but were there any concerns in the back of your mind? How am I going to feel about this child if she doesn't or he doesn't come from my body? Am I going to be able to feel like a parent? What was that like for you?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. That was certainly something I struggled with. I think maybe on an even larger scale, just becoming a parent in general, the more I thought about that actually becoming a reality, the more seriously I was kind of taking a look at the broken pieces of me. So I guess that was probably enhanced when you think about adoption, because it's, somewhat explainable when you can pass on, your biology. You don't really know what you're getting, but you kind of know what you're getting.
Right.
And then I would think, a lot about, sort of where my brokenness is. And then whatever child would come into her home, a completely separate story, a completely separate experience in the womb, those types of things. And I tend to probably overthink a lot of these situations. So I definitely thought long and hard about that. As far as how would I be able to love a child that didn't come from my body? I didn't feel like I would have a problem doing that, but I definitely spent a lot of time and worry about how that child would attach to us. And that actually continued. I had anxiety about that. Mm-hmm. I would say for the first year, I had several moments when I went to Chad and he's laughing because it didn't sound crazy. I mean, it's a very real thing, attachment, as far as any kind of parent, but there were several times that he just sort of had to bring me back to reality of the fact that she was really attached to us. But I would read something in a book and, sort of start to question myself. But in a way, those are healthy things because, then you can be intentional about how you're parenting. But I definitely worried a lot more about how they would attach to us as opposed to me being able to love them personally. Anyway, I don't know about Chad.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think if there was any looking back at it, I think there was some initial fear more about how maybe my family would receive an adopted child versus a biological child. Mm-hmm. I think that was just pressure put on by me and society, not really any pressure put on me by family, because adoption has been in our family. But I think just the kind of that like desire that almost culture puts on you, or society, and not something that like I wrestle with now, but I think in the early years, that was something that definitely had to process as I was thinking through adoption. And is that like, am I going to be okay with that? And, what's crazy is I never thought about it again. Like it's just when you hold your baby for the first time, like all that goes away. Like mm-hmm. At least it did for me. And actually someone actually gave me advice, like even it was another dad, and he actually said it took him almost 3 weeks to really like not love his child, but like realize what was happening, to the point where like, this is my child. And so I kind of went in like low expectations that I may not feel anything the moment I hold her. But I was instantaneous. I mean, I like melted. I mean, God knew that I needed a daughter. He melted like all these like hard edges of my heart, I think like almost instantaneously.
That's a beautiful,
something else coming from a woman's perspective, because I know this is something that's common and I know this is your area of expertise. I went through the years that we were struggling to get pregnant. I went through probably some very similar things as other women go through, is, every time somebody else gets pregnant, how much that hurts, and all the baby showers and those things. I would say, and there's other women that I've talked to that feel this way. I wasn't one of those women who was necessarily excited to be pregnant. That's not to say if it ever still does happen that I wouldn't be excited, but that wasn't like a longing for me, but I did long to be a mother, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely, it does.
Yeah. Totally. So I think, even now, like I've definitely mourned, that side of things about not having our own biological baby, but that's something that God's really healed in me. Like, that's not a longing I have. Whereas I know there's other women in my life who have had similar stories of me. Like, I'm thinking about one friend in particular who they adopted, and now she's had a couple of her own biological children after adopting their kids. And that was a longing for her to still have biological children. Whereas mine sort of just, I don't know, for whatever reason, that's like a protection that I have in my heart, or it's something that God has healed in me. So I don't know. I just think it's interesting and worth saying that every woman's, desires and journeys are really different, and they're just not going to look the same, So I just wanted to add that.
That's valuable. It is. And for you, God blessed you with what you needed. It was something unique for both of you. Chad, you described holding crew for the first time, and Julie, what was going on in your heart? I just want to give you an opportunity to share about how crew came into your life. We've talked about your heart and adoption, and she's your daughter, but just every story is a bit unique. What was it like finding out about her? How long did you have to wait? Bringing her home? Just some highlights of that piece of the story.
Yeah, thanks. That's hopefully we can be concise here because it's a long story. So, one of the things, like we mentioned, this fear of kind of the paperwork and the process, and we talked to a lot of people that were adoptive parents, and you just hear horror stories about adoption agencies, and they may not be true horror stories, but you hear like it just takes forever, 18 to 24 months. And you're just like, hey, can I emotionally do that? And we actually came across a couple friends that mentioned adoption consultants. And I didn't even know that was a thing. They help you with the paperwork, they help you with the process. At this point, I didn't really know what that was. And so both Julie and I actually were having those conversations with people, and we both kind of had heard about adoption consultants and started doing some research and came across a company in Atlanta called Faithful Adoption Consultants, and really just got attached to them. Like, one of the things that we loved about them were, faith-based, Christian. They work with a network of agencies across the country. And so, that really gave us confidence. And it's funny, when Julie tells the story, she sometimes calls them faithful adoption counselors, because they were, through the process, really counseling us through the emotional ups and downs. And, they've been there before. They help people, they help hundreds of families adopt kids every year. And I can't speak Courtney Lott, who's one of the founders, her and her husband Emery are just amazing. Anyone that's thinking about adoption, check out Faithful Adoption Consultants. Like, they just made the process so easy for us. So from, timeline wise, when we decided to move forward with Faithful Adoption Consultants, it took us probably 4 months to fill out the paperwork. Mm-hmm. You can do it probably as fast as 45 to 60 days. Yeah. We actually have some friends that are in the process right now and actually did it faster than that. They're go-getters, and really motivated. And that's like the paperwork and getting your home study approved. And then once home study is approved, we were in the matching phase, which that's when we're, getting cases and actively being looked at by birth mothers, and, we're all that. And so I don't know how long, was that another 4 or 5 months?
Yeah, it was about 9 to 10 months start to finish.
Yeah. So when we tell people that, they're like, oh, like that feels very fast. Most people, you hear at least a year, if not more. And actually we're probably on the longer end of someone with faithful adoption. It's actually sometimes shorter. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but timeline, I think. 8 to 9 months.
Wow.
Anything to that?
That's encouraging. And I just have to say that if somebody's listening to this and they're driving, we're going to put the link to Faithful Adoption Consultants in the show notes to this program so that people can go find it. Thanks for that.
Yeah, we cannot speak more highly of them. And I would say, as far as people tell you about the waiting, when the term is going active. So when you go active and you're getting looked at by birth mothers, you basically submit a book that's your life story. And then that's how birth moms will choose you. And, that is not something you can be prepared for. as far as the emotional roller coaster of just, kind of learning about these stories and, where these people are coming from, and then, waiting to see if they're going to choose you. It's just, we have some friends going through it right now, and I talk to the wife almost every day. Well, we do. We've talked about almost every day because I actually can understand. It's just not something until you're there. But, I think looking back on how Cru came to be, there's so many specific things that happened that sort of, turned our course a little bit in the direction towards her, looking back now. But one of the cool stories is we really had hoped when we started filling out the paperwork that we would have a baby by Christmas. That was just a hope we had, and we were visiting Chad's family in his hometown. At the time, his parents just moved here, but in Valparaiso, Indiana, for Thanksgiving. And we were getting in the car, getting ready to drive home one morning really early. It was November 27th, and it was like 5 a.m. And I remember Chad and I both, I definitely had tears in my eyes, hugging his parents, saying, I just don't think it's going to happen by Christmas. We just need to prepare for that. And I remember just driving out, being really sad. But there's this really beautiful picture on this field that you pass. And I remember taking a picture of that and really feeling at peace. And Chad can tell you the story of when we found out that she was going to be ours, because he was the one who got the phone call. But it turns out that she was actually born on that morning, on that day, November 27th, and we didn't know it at the time. So,
wow.
Yeah, it was just one of those. There were so many things like this that, you look back and it's like, that was God.
Yeah.
There's just no other explanation, but that's something we'll always remember.
Yeah. And you had asked kind of how we found out and heard. It's a really, I think we, found out about her honestly that day. Like I think November 27th when she was born, it was a stork drop, like the case came, we kind of put in for it. And then 3 days later, so she had been born and still, family hadn't been chosen. Never forget, I got a call and it was actually from Emery, which was Courtney's husband, which I thought was just really weird. He really wasn't involved in that process. And I was actually packing up my office at the agency because we were actually shutting the agency down and going to work full time for Michael Hyatt and Company, and got a call and answered it, and it was Emery, and then Courtney was on the line, and they both just kind of freaked out, excited that this little girl that was born on November 27th in Phoenix, Arizona was ours. And I'm kind of getting choked up thinking about it because it was a really special moment. They called me first so that I could really surprise Julie. And so I was it was December 1st, actually, because looking back, we had a Christmas party for the Michael Hyatt Company Christmas party that evening. And, Julie wasn't feeling well, so she was actually napping at home. And so I rushed to Target to get baby clothes, like girl baby clothes, and a card to kind of write a message, and so that she could open and see that, like, hey, we're having a girl. And you're going to be a mom, and like kind of this dream that I've had for her and dream she's had for herself for such a long time. So when I came to the house, like she was asleep. I had to wake her up. She was still kind of foggy, and gave her this gift. Like I don't just normally come home in the middle of the day, like showering my wife with gifts. It's not a normal thing. And she was just kind of like out of it. Not out of, like she was still kind of sick and, waking up and groggy, and he's reading the letter, and, there's a line that says, "You're going to be a mom." And she looks up in tears. She's like, "I'm going to be a mother." And I've actually captured it on video. So I have that. And it's just a moment we'll cherish forever. And we then jumped on the phone and got airplane tickets and hopped on a plane in a few hours out to Phoenix and picked her up the next day. It was a wild ride for 24 hours for sure.
Wow. What I sense in listening to both of you, Chad and Julie, you sense this as a great gift that, that God blessed you with something incredibly special for you. I love that sense. But your journey in bringing Cru into your family in the following months and whatever it wasn't just a straight line. It wasn't without challenges. Just share for a bit what was going on in your heart with the unanswered questions and waiting until finally she was yours forever, and just that roller coaster bit of emotional time.
Yeah, that was, so we brought her home in December and, celebrated Christmas. It was just such a sweet time. And then we got a pretty unexpected bump in the road. It's just started as a phone call in early January that started some really unforeseen legal issues, really that put us in jeopardy of potentially losing her, not because of something that we did, but it sent us on quite a different journey of faith than that we were expecting. And I will say this, I am somebody who I would say I'm a recovering worrier. I got really good at trying to iron out everything that could potentially go wrong. And I had, gotten to a point where I wasn't as much that way, but certainly having, crew home in the winter and when Chad went back to work, the house was quiet. And I remember, kind of coming up with a lot of things that I could worry about, that, she would get sick this certain way and I couldn't take her out because it's, flu season and there's all these things and she hasn't been vaccinated yet. And I remember specifically, coming up with a lot of these things that could potentially go wrong. Of course, none of those things went wrong, but this other thing did, which, at the time felt much worse than anything that I was dreaming up to worry. And I'm saying this because there was a lesson to me, and that, most of the time, the things we spend our time worrying about never happen, but sometimes other things do that we haven't even thought about or aren't on our radar. But even the way that God showed up in those months, just to bring us peace and people around us and community, was really quite amazing. And they were some of the harder months that we've ever had to endure as far as uncertainty goes in our life. So that's kind of what I would say in short about that. I don't know what Chad would say.
Yeah, I think I would echo all of that. I think obviously had some challenges that we didn't plan for, or, we did worry a lot. I think, what ended up happening is normally in adoption like this, the adoption is finalized within, 6 months. Based on what was happening, there was an indeterminate amount of time that it could take to potentially finalize the adoption, which, the waiting game is always hard, but there was a time where we felt like it would be 12 to 18 months. And fortunately enough for us and, for really everyone that was involved, it actually, we came to a really great resolution and ended up, basically finalizing the adoption within, when she was about 9 months old, 9 or 10. Mm-hmm. And, it was just, I like, as I say that, I think of the picture with her sitting on the judge's lap with our community around us. And she is just like in heaven, we had to everyone had to raise their hand and, say a pledge, and she's looking at us and there's a picture of her raising her hand.
Both of her hands.
She had no idea what was going on, but the picture makes you think she does. And it's just, it's a special moment.
Yeah. Well, just a word or two about your life with Crew now. What's it like now to have her as your daughter?
Oh, it is so much fun. I just think fun. I'm somebody who, Chad's somebody who's quicker to sort of laugh and default to joy in life. And I'm somebody who's a little bit quicker to not necessarily, I'm not Scrooge or Eeyore, but I can tend to sort of take things a little bit more seriously than maybe the next person. But I don't think there's a day we've had her that I haven't laughed like from the belly, from a real place. So I would say it's joyful. Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking of some special moments even this morning and the last week. And I am the one that's normally the joyful one, but and Julie's normally the one that's crying, more so than me. And that question actually causes a lot of emotion and stirs a lot of emotion in me because I'm not one to stop and smell the roses or to enjoy little things. And I could rattle off like 200 little things about Crew that I have just loved in the last 2 weeks. like this morning we decided to just meet at Starbucks on my way to work and get her a bun. We get this bun for once a week. It's kind of a treat. It's like a cinnamon roll. And, Julie and I are sitting and she's just like walking around, like owning the place and saying hi and pointing out everything and wanting to throw something away. And just like, the 15 minutes I had with her this morning was just such life-giving to me. And it's just really, I think, brought Julie and I closer together. It's really made us think about really what we want in life, in our marriage, and helped us get more discipline. I think some people lose discipline when they have kids, just because things are chaotic and just more time. And it's forced us to be more disciplined. We were always the the couple that was checking out the new hot restaurant in town and, just kind of going and seeing people. And, we really hunkered down, sleep trained her, really kind of just got a close-knit group of friends. And for, the first 6 to 9 months, obviously there was stuff going on, but it was more about we had the long-term picture in mind. And Julie's done an incredible job of really fostering Cru's heart, her personality, her fun loving. And it's just been when I come in from work, she just, wherever she's at in the house, if she hears me, she screams daddy and comes running in the hug. And it makes me melt every time.
Oh, yes. Well, Chad, you've alluded to the reality that having children changes people when you become parents. And maybe just comment a little more on what that journey has been like for the two of you, how having Cru in your life has impacted your marriage, your relationship together. What's that been like?
I'll let Julie tackle it first, and I'll pick up the crumbs afterwards.
Yeah, that's a big question. Cru came into our life when I was 38. So I had, I was a little bit, I guess, of an older new mom, although that's becoming more common these days. But I think there are a lot of advantages to sort of being able to get some things ironed out, personally before you bring a child into your life. But, for me, there was actually some unaddressed, a fairly big piece of unaddressed trauma that I hadn't dealt with. And really that I hadn't even told many people about. And so, part of the story there, and part of how Cru came to us, and part of why it is so special, is because, and this is getting pretty personal, but I think it could be helpful for some people. I did not want a girl. And because we were adopting, we had some sort of say, in that, as far as wanting to only present to moms who were having boys. And for a while we were doing that. And there were a lot of reasons that I would sort of say on the surface as to why I just want to raise a boy, because I liked sports growing up, and they don't have as many emotions. But really underneath all of that, there were a lot of deep layers of really tracing back to a lot, in part, to this unaddressed trauma that I had. And I think that, I should back up and say that I had a long conversation with our adoption consultant, but this is why I call her a counselor, one day. And I was just getting real honest with her, saying am I trying to play God too much in this, And she really had a pretty frank and very loving conversation with me. And at the end of that conversation, I finally decided, I'd spent some time praying, and I was like, okay, God, I'm going to leave this to you. And really, we said yes to some girls to that point, but it was mostly boys. And this is not the way that God works always. I totally get that. But literally the next day or the next 2 days, we said yes to Cru, and then she was ours a few days later. So God doesn't show up when we change our minds necessarily. He doesn't even need us. I get that. But that was a big piece of it for me. So, then bringing a girl into our home and having her, and just, the sort of power of having this vulnerable child in your life, much less a little girl, really intensified a lot of the things that I needed to deal with. And that took some time, probably more time than I would have liked. But eventually, we got into counseling together earlier this year, about 10 months ago. And that started a journey of really kind of uncovering a lot of the things that we needed to uncover so they were able to heal. And one of the things I've been doing a lot of reading. There's 2 books that have impacted me greatly. I don't know if you want to link these as well. but The Soul of Shame by Curt Thompson is a book that I would say, I think I underlined probably almost every word in that book. And he quotes a lot of Dr. Dan Siegel, and really it's around the concept of your children being able to have the best chance to grow up, in a healthy home, obviously loving the Lord. We're Christian people who, that's very important to us, but kind of what is the theory behind what was sort of driving a lot of this is that your children have a really good chance to grow up understanding their own stories to the degree of which their parents understand their own stories. So to me, that felt urgent, that we have this child now and we had these things that we needed to address. And in order for her to have a really good chance at life, we had to figure these things out for ourselves first. So that's really been a journey for us the last, 10 months.
I take my hat off to you, Julie. Having a child helps you see that whatever you have unfinished isn't only about you. It's now about this child. Mm-hmm. And I'm hearing from you that you made the decision to do whatever it would take, however difficult it would be. And it would be difficult, but that didn't matter anymore because now you cared enough about Cru that you had to do this. You really weren't left with a choice. Yeah.
And I wish I would have had the courage to do it sooner. But we didn't, do it any sooner. And, the fruit that has come from it already has just been amazing. And I would say, for me in our marriage, we're closer than we've ever been. And, what I told our counselor the last day, one of the last sessions that we had, I had this smile on my face and I was telling her that my baseline for a lot of life used to kind of just be like angst and worry and anxiety and, depression and those things. And now my baseline for life is a lot closer to peace. And, it was certainly God working through our counselor. And, I think a lot of times, we think about healing and we want it to be instantaneous. We want God to touch us and heal us. And I believe he can do that. But I believe more often than not, he sends us through a process. And that's what he did with us. And, there was things revealed along the way. And I think it's what our hearts could handle at the time and what we could take on. And then what we could then in turn, give back to God and to each other to be able to grow closer together. So, so many miracles, I think, happened in these last 10 months in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, from my perspective, she covered the gamut there, but, when you have a child, you start to, from my perspective, if we were really honest, our marriage wasn't anything that we were proud of at that moment. If this was something, and part of looking back, was really hard for me is I had to own pieces of my story and what I did to reinforce some of that trauma and stuff that happened earlier in Julie's life. And that was really, really hard. But the reality is we started at ground zero in the sense that for two reasons why we jumped into it is one, we knew we could have a better life together. And in two, give Cru a picture of what scripture says marriage is.
Yes.
Outside looking in, I think most people would have thought we had, this godly marriage, other than maybe a few people in our life that really knew or saw us year 2 through 5. We were public bickerers. It was, we thought it was funny, but it was probably super annoying. Not that we have it all figured out, but we are both committed, and now we've got tools. And, I'd love, Julie, for you to talk about this, until we can reckon with our own story. And I think in adoption, this is even more important, that we can't help an adopted child, reckon with their story. And this is something Julie and I were actually just talking about this morning. And I forget what the quote was.
Yeah, you basically said it. I mentioned it earlier, but yeah, I just think there's a great responsibility, in stewarding our own stories and, how we honor God with those, but, certainly having a child, I think, the big blessing in that is that we both were on board with it and willing to do whatever it took at that point, so I would say that was, going in, something we were very much on the same page about. And it was hard. I mean, there were days and weeks and months that were hard, but I do think I agree with Chad. He said it earlier. It's the best thing we've ever done for our marriage. And I think for our future. So
what I hear is that you saw bringing Crew into your life as something you were doing for her, although you wanted a child, but this was giving her a better life. And God saw it as giving the two of you, Chad and Julie, a better life. He was doing a miracle, 180 degrees back on the two of you through bringing Crew into your life.
Yeah, no doubt, for sure. Yeah, and I mean, it's easy to look back now. I say, why did we have to wait so long for kids, or to grow our family? And obviously it's because God had Crew picked for us. There's no doubt in our mind. But also, I think earlier in our marriage, we had kids. We weren't ready for it. As much as we thought we were ready for it, like there's a chance that we may not be here today together. I mean, I firmly believe that in our faith and everything that wouldn't have been the case. But I think that there was a good chance that we were not equipped emotionally and individually and as a couple to do it well. And I think, that was, looking back, you can we thank God for that protection, even though looking back, it's still hard, but I know that God protected us.
Yeah.
I feel like we could talk a whole lot longer. I really want to thank both of you for your story. You've been so vulnerable, and I appreciate that. And I want to honor you, Chad, you, Julie, and blessings to Crew. May God bless each of you and your family going forward. This has been awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Nothing need be wasted. That's one message that I get from this conversation with Chad and Julie. It doesn't matter what the process that you go through is. God can take that and turn it 180 degrees and do remarkable things in your heart and life. Whether it's building a family in the process of adoption or any other process, I know that He can do that for you as well. Be sure to check the show notes. You'll find the link there to Faithful Adoption Consultants and to the book Julie mentioned, The Soul of Shame. I would love to hear from you if this has been meaningful to you, or if you have a question or a topic you'd like us to address on an upcoming episode of Relationship Prescriptions. And if you have a message that you would like to get to Chad and Julie Canon, let me know and I'll be happy to connect you. Thank you for being part of our podcast family. And until next time, may God bless you. I want to remind you also that our brand new online community, the Fully Alive Group, is open and available. This is an online community of people seeking to experience the life that God has for us in every area, physically, emotionally, relationally, and spiritually. We have some really awesome guests that will be special presenters coming up this next month. And we have a 2-week free promotion available right now. If you become a member of the Fully Alive Group prior to June 3rd, that's sometime during the next few days, you can get 2 weeks absolutely free. So go to fullyalivegroup.com. Check it out. I would love to have you as part of our online community there. Thank you again for being part of our podcast family. And until next time, may God bless you.